Yeah, well, astronomy is without borders simply because there's only one sky, and that sky would go over China and then Japan, US, India, and 24 hours later repeat itself. Astronomy is actually, surprisingly, I would say, a very expensive science. If you look at something like James Webb Space Telescope, the greatest and best recent space telescope, that's about $10 billion to build. China built something called FAST. It's a radio telescope. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. So even the richest countries can't actually afford to build facilities across the electromagnetic spectrum. And even if they could, they won't have the ability to digest all the data that comes in. So historically, collaboration in astronomy has been always international, because sometimes you want to go and look at the southern sky, but your country is in the north. So for example, there's a very strong US-Australia relation in astronomy for the simple reason the Australian continent offers a view that you can't get in the US. So I think they're both practical reasons. Since it really is not a science that has got national security implications immediately involved, it lends itself to being an international endeavor.
How do you see opportunities for deeper partnerships between Chinese institutions like Westlake and global centers of astronomy?
China may be even entering its golden period in science. It has now the second largest economy, and in some ways perhaps even close to being the first one, using different metrics. As well as there's a strong, I would say, internal push to now go to the next step. Countries first initially focus on security, then economic security, and then they want to do things like science and arts and other things that are in some sense the legacy products, so they leave. And so Westlake is coming at an appropriate time, because I would imagine soon there'll be desire even on other side, in other institutions, to see whether they could work with China. And the main advantage I would say Westlake has compared to the more traditional universities like PKU or Tsinghua is it's a private university, and so they have a certain degree of flexibility, and that is something they should take big advantage of. And that's something I can say with some experience, because the university I work for, and one which Westlake hopes to emulate, is Caltech, and which is also a private university.
How do you see AI and machine learning reshaping astronomical research in the coming decade?
Well, I would say there are two areas in science in the last several decades which have really dominated data production. Surprisingly, it is biology, namely with genome sequencing, and astronomy, because of these large surveys. Only now maybe the holdings in YouTube has exceeded astronomy data collection. So astronomers have been in the data science field actually, and statistics and probability for a very long time. I have a slightly, let's say, more ordinary view of machine learning and AI. I see this as a development in mathematics, like previous developments. So, for example, the invention of calculus enabled what is now called, numerical analysis. So, if you wanted to predict the weather, it's not it's not a formula. You have to put in the various measurements, use fluid dynamics equations, and run big programs, and then you can make prediction, right? So years ago, that was a big deal thing. It was a surprise because there are no computers, so the concepts are there, but computers made this happen. So I sort of view AI and machine learning as the next development of sort of a numerical mathematics. It's a different sort, in some sense. Calculus looks a little simpler, but I think in 20 years from now, we'll simply be seeing AI and machine learning as a branch of mathematics whose tools scientists are using, and whose tools like numerical analysis has found wide acceptance, we'll have this. So I'm not much into, well, there's a big, it's something totally new. In my mind, it'll be foolish to ignore AI and machine learning, just like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, if the institutions which ignored numerical development of computers and analysis, that would have been a mistake. And so I think the clever universities will actually seek to work on the edge of these sorts of things. And astronomy is very well poised to take advantage of sort of advances in data science because we are very large data generators.
What advice would you give to young scholars in China who aspire to contribute to global astronomy? And how should Westlake prepare students for this next frontier?
The good news is I've been let's say, I have about 40 years of interacting with young people. In fact, this is my 40th year at Caltech, so basically I finished my PhD and I've been at Caltech since. The quality of the Chinese undergraduate education is very good in my mind. So the students who will join Westlake and other graduate program, they're actually in a very good position. They come with well prepared. The main challenge I would say for a young person learning in China, I would say twofold. One is all science is international, but astronomy even more so for the reasons we earlier discussed. So they have to sort of learn that whatever they do will be in the international arena and recognize on day one. So I would urge them to simply accept the fact that English is a lingua franca and that they should absolutely aim to master it and beyond as a job requirement. The other one is to actually travel, go to other places of excellence and see how things are done, because each system has its own, let's say, advantages, strengths, and weaknesses. Different people thrive in different circumstances, so it's important for them to have the opportunity to both see visitors in China, but also for them to actually go have hopefully some sort of a Westlake program that allows them to stay at a brother institution for a month when they're doing some research. And I think that sort of understanding how to think in how do different groups of people think is extremely valuable.
Looking ahead 20 or 30 years, what do you hope will be humanity's most significant milestone in space?
Well, there's some fairly, I would say, obvious ones from the current, as defined by what we understand and don't. Certainly, in astronomy, a big puzzle is what exactly is dark matter and how does dark energy come about? I mean, they're like very hard questions. I'm not sure whether we'd be ahead in 30 years, but certainly if you are, at some level, that would be the kind of a straightforward thing to say, maybe we'll see a big progress. And again, more technically speaking, astronomy has been, in fact, sort of I would say the spiritual center of physics. But the one thing we haven't made big progress is gravity. In the sense, the theory for gravity is what's still called a classical theory, whereas the theory everywhere else is quantum, and we do now believe the universe is ultimately a quantum in nature. It's not continuous, which is sort of an approximation. So quantum gravity still eludes us. Whether the answer for that will be found in some astronomical observations or, in some very high energy observations or simply in our mind, as in some new theoretical things, I don't know. But the unification of gravity with quantum mechanics is, I would say, sort of a joint astronomy physics dream, perhaps. And more on the sort of the other side, and I'm actually very excited about that all the time, is astronomy is the time, when you go up and look at the stars on a dark night, and then you start thinking, well, is the sun like any other star? And the answer is probably yes. Then Does it also have planets? So the idea of extrasolar civilizations and life, in general, extrasolar life, or extraterrestrial life. It could be even in Europa, for all I know. But I think that, to me, is, I would say, like a humanity, what many people would immediately resonate. I would sort of say, maybe, is it possible that we'll actually have some rovers on Mars? They'll be digging around some things and find evidence of, I'm not saying civilization, but evidence of life on Mars, maybe 1 billion years ago, or maybe even some sort of primitive life form on Europa or Ganymede. I don't know. To me, that's a game changer, because it tells you, we're not that special, that this is sort of stars, planets, life. It's sort of a part of a standard thing that's happening everywhere. And hopefully that will recenter some people's view of how special we are, or how special we are not.
Caltech, like Westlake, is a small, focused research university. What are the advantages of this model of university in achieving some of the goals that we've discussed today?
Yeah, since I spent most of my life at Caltech, and I've grown very fond of the spirit of Caltech, it's a bit of a precarious place, actually, because the total number of faculty at Caltech is 300. We only take 250 undergrads a year, so the steady state population of undergrads, is less than 1,000, kind of an expensive way to teach young people. And we have a comparable number, slightly larger, in fact, postdoc, PhDs, okay, PhD students. And the motto of Caltech has been to, in fact, do whatever few things we want to do, we should do them really well. And ideally aim to be world leaders. Of course, not all the time we succeed. I have to tell you one thing, though, it might be a fun thing for this segment you're producing. Caltech was founded by an astronomer. Oh. Okay, his name was George Ellery Hale, and he wanted to build, and that's when it's Hale who basically wrested away astronomical leadership from Europeans to the United States, so starting about 1910. So he wanted to build a large telescope, and obviously not on the East Coast for weather reasons, and had found Los Angeles as a great place to build. And then he wanted an institute to go with it. So they took a small local polytechnic school called Through Polytechnic School and converted to California Institute of Technology. Hale was a very remarkable person. I would say that when you're a small place, you should have a very clear idea. When you're a large place, it's fine, because some parts may be going up, some may be going down. It's hard to maintain excellence all the time. But in a small place, you can't afford. So I think my advice to my colleagues in astronomy at Westlake is choose a few areas, and you say, we're going to excel in that, and stick to that. And also, if you're done with that field, or sometimes you make tremendous progress in a field, then you should move on. You should just shut down that program, move on. And that's something large universities have a hard time. There's more inertia. The other thing I notice is a big difference between Caltech and other universities in the US, which there are many private universities of different sizes. I think Caltech is perhaps the smallest of that in the R1 universities, if my memory is right. It's very important to have a very vigorous debate about strategies that allow you to either amplify what you're doing or shut down things that are no longer competitive. So otherwise, a small place has a risk of actually being subcritical.
From your perspective, what is the core philosophy that has been most critical to the success of it over the decades? What is the essence that Westlake came out from it?
Yes, it's focus. It's strategy and focus. You have to strategize and say, where do we think we can make the best or the most gain? For example, Caltech has a certain style which might surprise you. There's some very large projects such as Hubble Space Telescope okay, or James Webb Space Telescope. And you'd think if you're a leading astronomy department, then you want to have a very big role in that. In contrary to that, actually, Caltech, we've avoided being heavily involved in large national projects, okay, because the things we want to do them in a more clear way that we can control, we can excel, we can push hard if need be, or pull back if need be. So it's tempting to actually get involved in very large national and international projects, but one should never do this as a minor partner, in my view. And of course, there's no point having a small university lead a billion-dollar project. I think this is a mistake we have made recently at Caltech, in my mind, but not historically. So Westlake, I think, should choose sort of mid-scale projects which are unique and go with it, and then let other users use China's large projects, whatever they're done by taxpayers, make good use of it like anyone else.
Do you have a message for our community?
Yes. Andy Grove, one of the founders of Intel, I think he even wrote a book. It's Only the Paranoid Win or something.
Yeah, Survive.
Survive, okay, yes, something like that. It's always good to, if you're small and you want to be at the top of the game, you should always ask, not in an obsessive way, but in a healthy way, how well you're really doing, and how be clear-eyed about it. And because that's the only way to be on top of the game, and not to take yesterday for granted and today for granted and so on. That's what I would say.